Welcome to Propeller Breeze, the show for student pilots, sim fans, and everyone chasing that first solo and beyond. All information in this podcast is for entertainment and general knowledge only. Always verify with certified flight instructors or regulatory authorities before attempting anything mentioned here.
Imagine sitting in this tiny, unair-conditioned examiner's office.
Yeah.
Right? You are just sweating through your shirt.
Oh, yeah, a classic check ride scenario.
Right. You just finished the flight portion of your private pilot check ride. And, you nailed a perfect short field landing. You are feeling absolutely great.
Best feeling in the world.
It is. But then the examiner looks across the desk and asks this, seemingly simple question. They go, why is the Cessna 172 you just flew classified as an airplane on your brand new pilot certificate, but the pilot's operating handbook categorizes that exact same machine as normal?
Oh, man. Yeah, that is the exact moment a lot of student pilots just completely freeze up.
Literally a deer in the headlights.
Exactly. Because, you spend months memorizing V-speeds, mastering crosswind corrections, studying weather charts, and then the FAA just throws this massive linguistic trap at you.
A trap that is basically built out of a dictionary that seems, designed to confuse you.
It really does feel that way sometimes.
You know how to physically fly the plane, but standing between you and your license is this dense legal labyrinth of the federal aviation regulations. And if you're a student pilot listening to this deep dive today, you just cannot skip this part.
No, you really can't. The examiners consider regulatory knowledge to be, just as critical as your stick and rudder skills,
Yeah.
You are entering a highly regulated airspace system, and you really need to understand the foundational definitions of the machines you're operating within it.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are taking the dense definitions found in 14 CFR 1.1 and 14 CFR 103, and we are going to try to translate them into plain English.
Plain English is definitely the goal here.
Yeah, we're going to look at the foundational rules that define exactly what it is you are flying, from the broadest possible definitions all the way down to specific certification classes. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Starting with the widest lens the FAA has, what legally constitutes an aircraft.
So, under 14 CFR 1.1, the FAA defines an aircraft as a device that is used, or intended to be used, for flight in the air.
Okay, wait. I am going to push back on that immediately.
I figured you might.
If I take a piece of notebook paper,
right,
fold it up, and I intend to throw that paper airplane across the room, by the literal reading of 14 CFR 1.1, am I, operating an aircraft? Does the FAA suddenly have jurisdiction over my living room?
Right. Well, no. The regulatory framework only applies within the context of, navigable airspace and the protection of people and property. The FAA does not care about your paper airplane because it lacks the mass to actually pose a threat.
Okay, fair enough.
But your hypothetical actually brings up a very real dividing line that every student pilot must understand before they even log their first hour.
Which is what?
The regulations split the sky into standard aircraft, which are heavily regulated, and ultralight vehicles, which operate in a completely different, much lighter bucket, so to speak.
Right. I always think of ultralights as, the bicycles of the sky.
Bicycles of the sky. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Because they're these lightweight, bare-bones machines. You don't need an N-number registration. You don't even technically need a pilot's license to fly one, and they play by an entirely separate rule book, right? Part 103.
Exactly. And the defining characteristic that separates those bicycles from a standard aircraft is strictly weight. 14 CFR 103 sets a hard limit.
How hard are we talking?
Very hard. A powered ultralight must weigh less than 254 pounds empty weight, period. And if you are operating an unpowered ultralight, like a hang glider, it has to be under 155 pounds.
Wow. Okay. So let's explore the reality of that empty weight limit for a second. If I bolt a two-stroke engine onto a tiny aluminum frame and it weighs 253 pounds, I'm an ultralight.
Yep, you're good. You can fly it under Part 103.
But say I decide to add a heavier, safer seatbelt harness, or maybe bolt on a small radio unit, right?
Yeah.
And that pushes the empty weight of that machine to 256 pounds. Do I instantly become an aircraft?
You instantly become an aircraft. You trigger an entirely new legal reality.
Just for 2 pounds?
Just for 2 pounds. The FAA draws that hard line at 254 because their entire safety philosophy is based on mass and complexity. Think about the basic physics equation for kinetic energy.
Mass times velocity squared.
Exactly. The heavier an object is, the more kinetic energy it carries, and frankly, the more damage it can cause if it crashes into a house, a car, or a person on the ground.
So the moment you cross that 254-pound threshold, You basically stop being a hobbyist in the eyes of the government.
You do. You enter the strict, highly regulated world of Part 1. You need an airworthiness certificate, you need maintenance logs signed by certified mechanics, and you, the operator, need a pilot certificate.
Right, the regulatory burden scales with the physical threat the machine poses to the public. That makes sense.
It really does.
Okay, so that sets up our basic boundaries. We've separated out the ultralight, so we know as PPL students we are dealing with actual legally defined aircraft. But, I mean, that is still a massive umbrella, isn't it?
No, huge.
Yeah. A two-seat Cessna 152 and a Goodyear blimp are both aircraft under 14 CFR 1.1. They just have completely different methods of staying in the sky. How does the FAA categorize those differences?
Well, they break it down based on the fundamental physics of flight. So the overarching division separates machines based on buoyancy. Lighter than air versus heavier than air.
Let's start with lighter than air, because I feel like a lot of student pilots kind of skip over this section.
You definitely do.
Because they just assume, well, I'm only ever going to fly airplanes. But these definitions show up on the written exams all the time, don't they?
All the time. You have to know them. The definition of a lighter-than-air aircraft is a machine that can rise and remain suspended by using contained gas weighing less than the air that is displaced by that gas.
So it operates on the principle of displacement.
Exactly. It's just buoyancy. But the FAA doesn't stop there. They make a critical subdivision based on how the pilot actually controls that displacement. They split them into airships and balloons.
Okay, so a balloon is what, just floating?
Yeah, a balloon is a lighter-than-air aircraft that is not engine-driven. It sustains flight solely through gas buoyancy, like a big helium envelope, or an airborne heater, like the burner on a hot air balloon.
Right, so the pilot can only really control altitude. They're completely at the mercy of the wind currents for horizontal direction.
Exactly. If the wind blows east, you are going east.
But if you slap an engine on it, it becomes an airship.
Right. It requires an engine and a steering mechanism. An airship is an engine-driven, steerable, lighter-than-air aircraft.
Oh, so like the blimps covering sporting events. Those fall squarely into this category because the pilot can actively dictate the flight path, even against the wind.
Precisely. Now, shifting to the heavier-than-air category.
This is where 99% of student pilots are spending their time and money.
For sure. This is where we leave buoyancy behind and enter the world of aerodynamics. The foundational definition here is the airplane.
Okay, how does the FAA define it?
14 CFR 1.1 defines it as an engine-driven, fixed-wing aircraft, heavier than air, that is supported in flight by the dynamic reaction of the air against its wings.
Okay, let's break down that phrase dynamic reaction for a second.
Good idea.
So the engine creates thrust, pushing the entire machine forward. The wings are physically bolted into a fixed position on the fuselage. So as the plane moves forward, the air is forced over the curved airfoil of those wings, creating a pressure differential that lifts the machine into the sky.
Spot on. The forward motion of the entire aircraft is a non-negotiable requirement for an airplane to generate lift. Now, compare that to a glider.
Right, because gliders don't have engines.
Exactly. A glider utilizes that exact same dynamic reaction of the air against its lifting orifices. It has fixed wings and an aerodynamic shape, but its free flight does not depend principally on an engine.
So glider pilots are basically surfing invisible waves of air, right?
Basically, yeah.
They rely on thermals, updrafts, and converting altitude into airspeed to maintain their dynamic reaction.
Yep.
The distinction literally comes down to the source of the forward motion.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting, though. And this is where a lot of check ride dreams are crushed.
Oh, boy.
I know where you're going.
Let's talk about the rotorcraft family. Because if I show someone a picture of a helicopter and a picture of a gyroplane, 9 out of 10 people are going to say they are the exact same thing.
They look incredibly similar.
They do. They both have a big spinning rotor mast on top of the cabin. But physically and legally, they operate on completely different principles.
Right. So the FAA groups them both under the broad category of rotorcraft, which means heavier-than-air aircraft that depend principally for their support in flight on the lift generated by one or more rotors.
But the trap is the difference between the two.
The critical distinction lies in where the mechanical power is directed. Let's look at the helicopter first.
Okay.
14 CFR 1.1 says it depends principally on its engine-driven rotors for its horizontal motion.
So in a helicopter, the engine is physically connected, like through a transmission, to that main overhead rotor.
Yes, the engine actively twists that mast, spinning the blades to drag air downward, which generates the lift. And to move forward, the pilot tilts that entire spinning disc, directing a portion of that engine-driven thrust horizontally.
So the engine is doing all the work. It
Yeah.
provides the lift and it provides the thrust.
Exactly.
But a gyroplane or an autogyro plays a completely different aerodynamic game.
Yeah.
The definition says its rotors are not engine-driven, except perhaps for starting the spin before takeoff, right?
Right. I want you to visualize a gyroplane clearly. The overhead rotor is completely disconnected from the engine during flight. It just spins freely on a bearing.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. If the engine isn't spinning the top rotor, what keeps the machine in the air? Like, why doesn't it just drop like a rock?
It's a great question. Because a gyroplane utilizes auto-rotation. The engine in a gyroplane is connected to a traditional propeller, usually mounted on the back, pushing the aircraft forward. As the propeller thrusts the machine forward, the relative wind strikes those free-spinning top rotor blades from underneath. That upward flow of air forces the blades to spin, and that spinning motion generates the dynamic reaction, or lift.
Oh, wow. So it is essentially an airplane with a free-spinning windmill on top instead of a fixed wing.
That's a perfect way to think of it.
The engine pushes the cart forward, the forward motion creates wind, the wind spins the windmill, and the windmill lifts the cart.
Yeah, the sequence of aerodynamic events is totally reversed. A helicopter pulls air down from above, a gyroplane has air forced up from below.
That is wild.
And the FAA demands student pilots understand this distinction because the physical mechanics dictate the pilot's control inputs.
Right, because if things go wrong, you need to know how to react.
Exactly. If you lose engine power in a helicopter, the pilot must aggressively lower the collective pitch to enter auto-rotation and prevent the blades from stalling. But if you lose engine power in a gyroplane...
The rotor is already in auto-rotation.
Exactly. The emergency procedures are entirely different.
That perfectly illustrates why the FAA insists on these pedantic definitions. It's literally life or death.
It really is.
We also need to touch on the niche flyers, though, the oddballs of the sky that have their own very specific physics.
Right, because the regulations have to accommodate every conceivable method of flight. Let's look at powered lift aircraft.
I always think of the military's V-22 Osprey for this one. These machines look like they belong in a science fiction movie.
They really do.
They take off vertically, hover, and then transition to flying like an airplane.
And the FAA defines them based on that dual nature. A powered lift aircraft depends principally on engine-driven lift devices or thrust for lift during low-speed flight and vertical takeoff. But crucially, it uses non-rotating airfoil's fixed wings for lift during horizontal flight.
So the engines literally rotate. They point straight up to blast air down for takeoff, then they pivot forward to act like airplane propellers for cruising.
Yep. Then you have the flexible wing machines. The powered parachute is a really unique classification.
What's that one?
It is a powered aircraft with a flexible or semi-rigid wing connected to a fuselage, but the wing is not in position for flight until the aircraft is actually moving.
Oh. It is like a go-kart with a fan on the back hanging from a parachute.
Yeah.
The wing is completely formless, just a pile of fabric on the ground, until the propeller pushes the go-kart forward and the air catches the canopy to inflate it into a lifting surface.
Exactly. And closely related in concept is the weight shift control aircraft. This is a powered aircraft with a framed pivoting wing.
Like a motorized hang glider with a tricycle undercarriage.
Right. And the defining element here is how the pilot maneuvers it. The flight control depends on the wing's ability to flexibly deform.
Wait, how does the pilot control it then?
The pilot controls pitch and roll solely by changing the aircraft's center of gravity. You do not have a yoke moving ailerons or elevators. You have a pilot physically throwing their body weight side to side or front to back on a trapeze bar to alter the machine's center of mass.
You literally steer it by becoming a human pendulum.
Basically, yes.
That is just wild. Okay, we have one more major 14 CFR 1.1 definition to cover before we move on to weight classes, and it is arguably the most extreme, the rocket.
Ah, yes. A rocket is an aircraft propelled by ejected expanding gases generated in the engine from self-contained propellants, and it is not dependent on the intake of outside substances.
Not dependent on outside substances is the key phrase there, right?
It is.
Because a Boeing 747 jet engine needs to ingest atmospheric oxygen to mix with its jet fuel to create combustion. But a rocket brings its own oxygen supply in tanks. It does not need the atmosphere to breathe, which is why it can operate in a vacuum.
Exactly. So physics dictates how a machine flies. But the FAA also introduces rigid regulatory thresholds based purely on the physical size of the aircraft, which brings us to the weight classes.
Right. Aviation has weight classes, just like boxing, and the magic number dividing the industry is 12,500 pounds maximum certificated takeoff weight.
Yep, 12,500 pounds is the regulatory firewall between general aviation and heavy transport. If an aircraft's maximum takeoff weight is exactly 12,500 pounds or less, it is classified as a small aircraft. The moment the manufacturer certifies it at 12,501 pounds.
Just 1 pound more.
1 pound more, and it becomes a large aircraft.
Okay, so this is kind of the sky's version of a commercial driver's license cutoff.
That's a good analogy.
If you want to drive a Honda Civic, you take a basic driving test. But if you want to drive a massive 18-wheel semi-truck, you need a CDL, specialized training, air brake endorsements, all that stuff. Because the consequences of making a mistake in an 18-wheeler are just catastrophic compared to a Civic.
Absolutely. And the FAA applies that exact same logic. If you transition into a large aircraft, you are legally required to obtain a specific type rating, undergo rigorous systems training, and face much tighter operational scrutiny.
Right. Now, there is another weight-based classification that has completely reshaped the landscape for modern student pilots, and that is the light sport aircraft, or LSA.
Yeah, the LSA category is really popular now. It was created to make flying more accessible and affordable. It allows people to fly smaller machines with a sport pilot certificate, which requires fewer training hours and doesn't mandate a complex FAA medical exam.
But the aircraft itself has to meet strict, simplified criteria, doesn't it?
Very strict. To qualify as an LSA, the machine must have continued to meet specific weight and performance limits defined in 14 CFR 1.1 since its original certification. They are limited to a maximum takeoff weight of 1,320 pounds. They cannot fly faster than 120 knots, and they are restricted to 2 seats.
So the list of what can be an LSA is pretty huge. You can have a light sport airplane, a light sport glider, a balloon, a powered parachute, a gyroplane. But there's a massive exception written directly into the regulation.
There is. The LSA definition explicitly excludes helicopters and powered lift aircraft.
Which begs the question, why? I mean, if the whole point of the LSA category is to make flying simpler, why can't a manufacturer just build a simplified lightweight helicopter and sell it as an LSA?
Well, because a simplified helicopter is basically an engineering oxymoron.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The FAA analyzed the underlying mechanics. A helicopter requires a swash plate assembly to constantly change the pitch of individual rotor blades as they spin. It requires an anti-torque tail rotor system. It requires complex transmission.
Lots of moving parts.
Too many.
Yeah.
The FAA determined that the inherent mechanical complexity of a fully engine-driven rotor system simply cannot fit into the relaxed maintenance and training framework designed for light sport aircraft. The mechanical failure points are just too high.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So the FAA is essentially protecting the pilot from a machine that requires a level of oversight the LSA category just does not provide.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have defined the machines, we know the physics of how they fly and the weight classes they fall into, but now we have arrived at the climax of the regulatory headache.
Here we go.
This is the scenario we opened the deep dive with, the examiner's absolute favorite trap, the double dictionary.
Yes, the overlapping definitions of category, class, and type. It's notorious.
The FAA uses these exact same 3 words to describe the pilot and to describe the machine. But they mean completely different things depending on which piece of paper you are looking at.
And it causes endless frustration for student pilots. I hear it all the time. But if you analyze the underlying logic, you'll see that the FAA is attempting to regulate 2 entirely different domains using parallel structures.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, they must regulate human skills, the airmen, and they must regulate mechanical limits, the aircraft.
Okay, let's put this into a concrete scenario. So say I'm a brand new private pilot. I walk into a flight school and I want to rent a Cessna 172. I pull out my pilot's license. Under my ratings, my airman category is airplane. But when the flight instructor hands me the physical manual for the Cessna, its aircraft category might be listed as normal or utility. Same word, totally different application.
Let's lay the definitions side by side. When the FAA uses the word category for airman, meaning you, the pilot, it refers to a broad classification of aircraft based on the fundamental physics of flight we discussed earlier. Airplane, rotorcraft, glider, lighter than air.
Right.
It defines the broad family of machines your human brain has been trained to operate.
So the pilot category is the physics. I know how to fly a fixed-wing machine, not a spinning rotor machine.
Exactly. But when the FAA applies the word category to the aircraft itself, it is defining a grouping based on the machine's intended use or its structural operating limitations. Examples include transport, normal, utility, acrobatic, limited, and restricted.
Oh, I see. So the aircraft categories tell me what the machine is legally and structurally allowed to do.
Right.
So a Cessna certified in the normal category is only built to withstand like 3.8 Gs of force. It is not legally allowed to do a loop or a barrel roll.
No.
If I want to fly upside down, I need an aircraft certified in the acrobatic category, which is structurally reinforced to handle 6 Gs.
Exactly. The human is certified in the airplane category. The machine is certified in the normal category. Now let's move one step down the matrix to class.
All right, looking at my pilot's license again, my category is airplane, and my airman class is single-engine land.
Right. For an airman, class is a classification of aircraft within a category that have similar operating characteristics. Single-engine, multi-engine, land, water, helicopter, gyroplane. It dictates the specific operational environment you are actually trained for.
That makes sense. Managing an engine failure in a twin-engine plane is a completely different operating characteristic than an engine failure in a single-engine plane. Landing on water requires different skills than landing on a paved runway. So my airman class proves I have those specific skills.
You've got it. Now look at class for the aircraft certification. Here it means a broad grouping of aircraft having similar characteristics of propulsion, flight, or landing. Examples include airplane, rotorcraft, glider, balloon, landplane, and seaplane.
Hold on, I need to stop you there. Airplane is a class for the machine, but airplane was the category for the pilot.
I know. This is the exact intersection where students get confused. Aircraft category is intended use normal. Aircraft class is its broad characteristic airplane.
Okay.
So the metal machine sitting on the ramp is certificated in the normal category, airplane class. Meanwhile, the pilot walking up to fly it holds a certificate in the airplane category, single-engine land class.
The overlap is just maddening. But the matrix does work.
It does.
Let's tackle the final layer, type.
All right. For an airman, a type rating refers to a specific make and basic model of aircraft. If you transition to flying large aircraft, so over 12,500 pounds, or turbojet-powered aircraft, the basic category and class training isn't enough.
Because they're just too complex.
Right. The FAA requires you to get a specific type rating added to your license for that exact model. A Boeing 737-700, a Gulfstream GIV, a Beechcraft 1900.
So just because I have a multi-engine rating does not mean I have any idea how the overhead hydraulic panel works in a Boeing 737?
Exactly.
The type rating proves I know that specific cockpit.
And for the aircraft certification, type simply means those aircraft which are similar in design. The FAA considers the 737-700 and the 737-700C to be the same type of aircraft because their underlying engineering is virtually identical.
Okay, so the implication of this entire double dictionary is that the FAA has basically built a giant lock and key system.
I love that analogy.
Right. The pilot's license is the key. It details the physical categories, operating classes, and specific types of aircraft the human brain is trained to handle. The aircraft's airworthiness certificate is the lock. It details the structural categories, physical classes, and design types the machine can safely endure.
Yes, the system interlocks. A pilot with a specific category and class of training must perfectly match an aircraft certified for those specific operational limits. If the lock and key do not align, the flight is illegal.
So, to all the student pilots listening, you have survived the regulatory weeds.
You made it.
Memorizing 14 CFR 1.1 might feel as dry as chewing on sand, but it is not just bureaucratic red tape designed to ruin your check ride. It is the fundamental vocabulary of your new life in the sky. When the examiner asks you to define your aircraft, they are not just testing your memory, they are testing your awareness.
Absolutely.
Knowing the difference between a gyroplane and a helicopter, or knowing exactly what category and class are printed on your certificate, it proves that you know the limitations of both yourself and the machine you are commanding.
It establishes the baseline for all aviation safety. But, looking toward the future, these definitions are about to face a massive stress test.
Oh, for sure, because the technology is suddenly outpacing the dictionary.
Exactly. We are seeing a boom in new aviation technology. Self-contained personal flying drones, electric vertical takeoff, and landing vehicle, eVTOLs, hybrid hover cars that you can park in your garage.
Stuff that sounds like science fiction.
Right. How will the FAA's rigid physics-based definitions in 14 CFR 1.1 handle a machine that uses 8 small electric rotors, relies on computer algorithms instead of dynamic reaction, and is flown by a pilot using a touchscreen?
I mean, it doesn't neatly fit the classic rotorcraft definition, and it certainly isn't an airplane.
Yeah.
Will the FAA stretch these legacy classifications from the 1950s to accommodate the future of personal flight? Or will the next generation of student pilots have to memorize an entirely new dictionary of categories?
The regulatory framework will have to evolve. It is just a matter of how many pages they add to the rulebook.
Until they rewrite the manual, you need to master the current one. Keep studying those definitions, walk into that examiner's office with confidence, ace your check ride, and enjoy the thrill of the flight. We'll get you next time.
That's it for this episode. Keep your wings level, your brain sharp, and catch you next time in the pattern. Thanks for riding with Propeller Breeze.